So just before we begin, I'll just introduce, this is Aaron Whitaker, Kella DeWitt, and Conrad Schellenberg. And I think Aaron and Kella wanted to point out that they're wearing matching jitenjes, you can explain them if you want.
Everywhere we went, you'll see in the pictures. Oh yeah. Nobody can see
go
that.
Go there.
Everywhere we went, everyone was wearing, or all the women I guess, were wearing these, but you can use them for a million things, and we love that. You can use them to carry your baby, or cover something, or sit on, or wear as a sweater, or hang on a wall, or use as a curtain, they're just amazing things. So, yeah. We got these so that we could match.
That wasn't the planned part of the presentation. I just heard them whisper, no one's going to be able to see our matching jitenjes behind the stairs. So, I just wanted to start by just saying that we were on what's called a study tour. Some people have called them mission trips, but I think sometimes we get some of these things kind of mixed up. And Nathan, the same thing, was on more of kind of a study tour type thing. So we didn't go to do any specific project or to go and build a school or build a well or anything like that. What we were doing is basically going there and visiting different parts of Malawi. We were based mostly in southern Malawi around Blantyre, and seeing what work the church is doing there. And this is actually really important. In some ways it's probably a better thing to do in some ways than going to build a specific thing. Because you get a more widespread experience of what's going on in a particular region. The other thing too with going to somewhere like Malawi and doing some sort of building project or something like that, you end up taking jobs away from Malawians, which is not really the best thing to do. So really this trip was about going and having an experience, building relationships with people, and representing the church. And a lot of us didn't really understand the importance of that until actually being there. For the people there to know that there are Christians in other parts of the world who are there caring about them and praying for them and supporting the different programs and projects that are going on in that part of the world, and to actually see those people. And we were representing basically the Presbyterian Church in Canada and the work that's being done for the Presbyterian Church. There were also 7 others from Ontario who were part of the trip who go to different churches in and around Toronto. And so we kind of made a bond with those people as well. So that's just to kind of give you an idea of what a study tour is versus sort of a project-based mission trip. So we were doing a study tour, and the main point of that really is really for tonight's kind of thing. It's for us to go and be able to come back and tell the stories of the people that we met and the things that we saw. The whole point is for us to come back and basically be able to share with you tonight what's going on in that part of the world. And how you might be able to be involved in what's happening there. Now, we've actually been really Canadian tonight. We haven't been particularly Malawian. And normally when people meet or start off in Malawi, there are very formal introductions. Introductions are really, really important, and welcomes are really, really important in Malawi. And what we're going to do for you, and we're going to ask you to pay attention, listen really carefully to what we're saying to one another, and there'll be a test later. So what we're going to do is the 4 of us are going to pretend that we have never met one another before, and we're meeting for the first time. And if we were in Malawi, this is how we would greet one another. Okay, this is what has to happen. All right. Mulibwanji. Oh no, we got to do it one at a time because I can't hear you.
Yeah, it's true.
That is not Malawian at all.
Delibuino, can you?
Delibuino.
Sicomo.
Mulibwanji.
Delibuino, can you?
Delibuino. Sicomo. Mulibwanji. Delibuino. Sicomo.
We just met Matt for the first time.
Yeah, so they just met me for the first time. Now, if you were, say, at a house party or something like that, had guests over, if somebody new came in halfway through the evening, the whole event would stop. Everyone would stop talking to one another, and someone would have to go around. And if they'd never met the people, that's basically what they would have to say to one another. And what we basically said was, how are you? I'm fine. I'm fine. How are you? Thank you. So now you've got all of that down. There's the first word up there, is Mulibwanji, but memorize all of that and you'll be okay in Malawi if you're ever meeting anyone. Now, if you can't do all of that, just remember that last word, Zikomo. Because Zikomo means thank you, but it can also mean, you can use it in kind of almost every circumstance. You know, if you bump into someone in the market and kind of accidentally hit them, Zakon. If you want to say no to someone who's trying to sell you something, Zakon. So really, you could just sort of keep saying Zakomo wherever you go, and you'll be fine in Malawi.
Yeah.
I think Erin's just going to share a bit about how people are welcomed in church.
So, wow, that's really loud. As Matt said, greetings are really important, and definitely the same is true in the church. So every Sunday, the minister or one of the elders stands up and they say, okay, is there anyone new in the church? Is there anyone we don't know? And they might look around and be like, oh, we don't know you. We don't know you. I think there's 2 sisters back there we don't know. And I could pick on someone, but I'm not going to. I'll just tell you what happened at one of the services. The church then calls them all to the front, and they take this time to remember people transferring their membership to. And they don't just say, who are you? They say, can we know you? And that means a bit more. At one service we attended, the elder doing the welcoming, first he said, come up here, because he was transferring his membership. He said, okay, what's your name? Okay, where are you from? Okay, so where do you work? Oh, you work in the bank. Okay, which branch? Okay, so you're really good to our congregation, right? And then he says, so are you single? Are you married? You bring a girl with you? Turns out he had a fiance back home, but, so that's the kind of thing. It seemed pretty normal there to ask questions like that, though. But as Canadians, we got off slightly more easily, so I could just say my name first and last, though. Last was very important, and where in Canada I was from. And one of the things that struck me most was how Presbyterian, but not the worship service was. So there were still hymns, they had a hymn book, still praise songs, there were still readers and things, but that all got picked the morning right before church. So that was slightly different for us. And just like we have calls and responses here, which lots of us are familiar with, those exist there too. But one really stuck with us. So if I said God is good, what would you guys say? Right, and I would say, I know, all the time. But this is the great part. They add this. That's his nature. Wow. Which is wow, but with sort of a Malawian accent and emphasis. So I'm going to try that one more time, and we need to be really enthusiastic because that was very subdued. So, God is good. All the time. And all the time? God is good. That's his nature. Wow.
That's getting close.
One of the other things that we did when we were in Malawi, we visited a number of churches, so we got to experience this a couple of times. We also stayed, each of us, with a different family for a weekend when we were there. Most of the time we were staying in different accommodations with our group, but we did get to experience staying in a Malawian household, and each visited different churches on that weekend. I, of course, because I'm a minister, was expected to preach in that service. I was given advance warning, but that's not necessarily always the case. And any of us were told in advance, you have to be prepared to, on the spot, in the middle of the worship service, you might be asked to pray, or to read a scripture, or to whatever. All of us by then had already had experience bringing greetings and introducing ourselves, so that was good. But this is all really part of the overwhelming hospitality that we experienced in Malawi. So this is how people are welcomed there. So Erin, what she just described about that young man being welcomed into the church, I'm sure he left that worship service feeling, wow, they really care about me. They want to know about my life. They've welcomed me into their church. Most of us would be terrified and thought, why would anyone be asking about my marital status on my first Sunday in the congregation? But this is just part of the overwhelming hospitality that's there. Everywhere we went, we were given tons of food and usually lots of pop. That's kind of the drink of choice for when there's guests, and in glass bottles. So that was kind of fun. And it was just really overwhelming. Constantly everywhere we went, people would say, feel free, just be at home. And again, we were welcomed into people's homes. I know one of our hosts was a little disappointed. He didn't manage to get a broad spectrum of socioeconomic families. So we were mostly staying with with kind of middle class or upper middle class families. So people who had, most of the families we stayed with owned cars. So it wasn't necessarily the norm of what is in the communities we were in Malawi. But I think, again, that kind of goes to what those congregations are like, is they really want to put their best foot forward, and also the people who are volunteering to take somebody into their home tended to be someone who wanted to show them, hey, this is what we have, and this is what we're able to accomplish in Malawi. But everyone was very, very welcoming, and just it was pretty overwhelming to see that.
So I was going to talk about the different cultural surprises. When we got there, we had a lot of culture shock. When we first got there to Malawi, there was a lot of things that were very different. First thing, everything was very crowded. I remember that's the first thing I remember, getting into the airport, and it was just like a mass of people surrounding you and trying to get your luggage, and it was just like, that was our first thing. It was just like a shock, and you're like, what is going on? But we eventually, that all came to, and it all worked out in the end, and we just noticed the population density when we're driving down the street and there are 5 or 6 people, out in a row walking on the street and stuff. The other thing that actually surprised me was the safety that I felt there. When I went to Europe, I would carry my bag and it would be in front of me. When I was in Malawi, it was like I was in Canada. I wasn't afraid that there was going to be pickpocketers. I wasn't afraid of any of that kind of stuff. We were explained to by the missionaries there that their main crime there is property crime. It's not personal crime. So that's where on the houses they actually had barbed wire or glass sticking into their walls for people not to be able to get into it. The other thing that was explained to me by Mike Burns there was that the police, like if someone does steal your bag or something, the police will actually come to the scene to protect the person that stole it, not to come to your aid, because the rest of the people in Malawi will go after that person, because that's just part of who they are. The other great thing was the food. We loved the food. The tomatoes were life-changing. Just ask any of the other three people I went to. We ate tomatoes wherever we went, and bananas. Bananas were, I don't know if you know much about Matt, but Matt is not a vegetable person. He actually ate vegetables every day. It was very surprising. We saw vegetables on his plate almost every single day. It was quite surprising. So that was good. And then the other thing, we went to Wednesday night prayers, and the lights went out. And we're like, oh, okay, so they turn on some candles, but then all you see is flashlights. And you see, it's everyone's cell phones. Everybody had cell phones there, and there was flashlights connected to everyone's cell phones.
Not just like an app, like an actual light.
Yeah, it was like at the bottom of their flashlight. You pressed a button, and it turned on their thing, which was surprising in itself. That basically everyone in Malawi had a cell phone. They didn't have house phones. They mostly all had cell phones. They all didn't have monthly plans or time on their phones, but they had a phone with them. What else? Power and water outages. As I was saying, the power outages with the cell phones, that was a normal thing. We would be eating dinner one day. It was a daily thing. Like, I remember at Amagazi, we were eating dinner, like went out. For people all across Malawi, that's something that happened. Later on, I'll be talking about the Lodge Mission Hospital, and that's one of the things that I'll be talking about. Fuel lineups was another big thing. Is the fuel there was so hard to get that people would wait in line for 5 or 6 hours or overnight to get petrol or diesel, and sometimes their cars would die out before they would even get to it. So, and the other last thing was us being called Azulus. Everywhere we went, people would chant Azungu, Azungu, and we're like, what does this word mean? And we finally found out it meant white person. And when we were in the villages, some of the kids had never seen us, and it kind of felt like a celebrity status almost, and they would chase our bus, and they'd be running as fast, and some of these kids could actually keep up with our bus, first off, and they were just chanting and saying, Azungu, Azungu, and it was cute, but yeah.
Did we have the same bus that you did, like it was going
yeah.
So. Yeah. And as we were driving through Malawi on our bus, called the Coaster, not super bus, but the coaster. From one project to another, we were talking to some of the staff who worked for the church, and pretty much everyone there asked us, so what do you think of Malawi? What do you think of Malawi? And most of us replied, well, it's beautiful. And this particular staff member challenged us, and he said, well, is it beauty or is it poverty? And so I've been bouncing this question around in my head ever since. The pictures that we're going to put up some of our beautiful pictures. The stories you're about to hear, they illustrate sort of both sides of the coin. Malawi is an absolutely breathtakingly beautiful place. The mountains, the lakes, the waterfalls, the animals, it's Africa and it's gorgeous. But the people are beautiful too. They're warm-hearted, they're welcoming, they're open, and they're full of the Holy Spirit. And those things being said, Malawi is one of the 10 poorest countries in the world. There's a huge lack of infrastructure. The scene exists in part because there's very few modern buildings and corporations. There's no McDonald's in Malawi. Its development is far behind that of many other African nations. And we were challenged was, would Malawi still be so beautiful if the economy was better, trade was more open, there was fuel, and if more modern buildings began cropping up everywhere? And I answered, and most of us did, well, I don't know. And I don't have an answer to the question whether is it beauty or is it poverty. But I do encourage you to think about that as we continue our presentation.
Is that me?
Yeah.
I guess one of the things we discussed on our bus as we were driving around is what is the thing about Malawi? What is the one defining issue that can really sum up how we can fix one of the 10 poorest nations in the world? And we came up with, first of all, we had to list all the problems. So you can flip to the next slide. There's essentially the hopelessness layer. Like you essentially have all of this stuff. You have HIV/AIDS, you have tremendous poverty, you have water problems, you have food problems, you have, what else is up there? There's corruption, there's non-existent infrastructure, you can't get trains from the coast there. There's tons and tons of problems. You can go to the next slide. The problem that we have here in the West is that we feel drained and we feel put down by this set of problems. Oh yeah. This is someone who is, the person in the middle there is a 23-year-old girl. Her name is Angela. She has AIDS. She has tuberculosis. Her husband passed away. She got AIDS from her husband. And she has 2 healthy kids, and she is very, very hopeful for her future. And this really is one of the things that was one of the tipping points for me. This is not how North Americans typically react to this. They think, AIDS, you're 23 years old, and you're going to... Oh yeah, she doesn't also have enough food. That's the ARV drugs. When you have AIDS and you take ARV drugs, you need to have lots of food, or else the drugs will start to eat your body. And you can see that she's... So, but she has huge hope. She wants to be a businesswoman. And this was one of the tipping points that we had. She welcomed us into her home. She's extremely poor. She was helped by other people in the neighborhood. She's actually helped by a program with BSHDC, which is an acronym we'll talk a lot about later. You can go to the next slide on that. I guess my point is that the hopeless layer that I just talked to you about, that I just named, is a false thing. Hopelessness is not, in general, what people feel in Malawi. I guess the mistake that I made is that I didn't know how much depth there was in Malawi, the depth of different things. And I also thought that what was needed to fix the problem was heroes and heroism, individuals going over there and just getting right into the hopeless layer and fixing everything. What I didn't realize was the last line, and that's the thing that I really would like to talk about. You can go ahead. So the depth, the people, they experience great tragedy. They die in their early 40s, if that's a late death. The life expectancy is very short. But they experience huge joy, really deep passion, really deep faith, really deep pain. Everything that deep reaches for the deep all throughout the life that's here. Great happiness, great frustration. There's also huge tradition, but there is also a huge desire to join in the new world. Okay, go ahead. Individuals, this is getting back to what I was thinking about. I thought that what you needed to do and what Africa needed was a bunch of heroes to go over there and fix the problem. And it turns out that's not what's needed. I thought it needed to be personal, and it can be personal, but it doesn't have to be an individual thing. It can be a system. And there's a really powerful system in place, and that is really hugely competent, that has huge insight into the problems and how the problems are interconnected. They're very creative, and Malawian, I think another word for Malawi is ingenious. They find, whatever they find, they will find a use for it. And they will use it till it is absolutely gone. The system is comprehensive and it's integrated. The people are passionate and committed. The people are faithful and they're faith-based and they're Christian. The only problem, and it's a big problem, is that they are dramatically under-resourced in terms of the number of people that are there and the amount of money that they have. So I guess the thing that my point here is that do I choose an approach where I need to be a hero and individually go over there and fix the problem and dig the well and heal the sick? You don't need to do that. You can take a different approach where you trust the system. The thing that you need to do is you need to develop leadership. And we're going to talk more about how we develop leadership as part of our project tonight. I think that's it on that. Go ahead. Oh yeah. This is just an example of, a small example of somebody that we met. This is a picture of some girls that are in a children's corner in one of the nastier parts. And it really shouldn't be a picture of them. It should be a picture of the person whose hand you might just see off on the corner here. This person, I started to get into a conversation. Remember, she is in one of the poorest neighborhoods. She's a volunteer in one of the poorest neighborhoods in Malawi. We started getting into a discussion about the kids that are there, and I was thinking about, oh, the kids are very cute, they're very nice, oh, smile, 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 great, great, great. She starts talking to me about under 5 development. She starts talking to me about gross motor skill, small motor skill development, group-based learning. She has under 5 psychology nailed, and she's a volunteer in one of the poorest neighborhoods, one of the poorest places in Malawi. It really took my breath away that this is the level of competence that reaches into the depth of this kind of a place. So that's what that is. These are some of the people that are hugely competent that are there. These are people that are in BSHTC. I won't name them all, but you can. We'll talk a lot about BSHTC, but this moment when Colin took this picture, what's that? Yeah, we should get to the next piece. When Colin took this picture, it was one of when the light went on that you can trust the people that are there with your money. Next. And then with that, BSHTC. Who's being serious?
I'm just going to. Okay. So Conrad's mentioned 7 or 8 times BSHTC as an acronym. It's the Blantyre Synod Health and Development Commission. When we got information about our trip and where we would be going, we saw this acronym all over our information packet, and we had no idea what it was. And we spent the majority of our time when we were visiting what is the church doing in Malawi in and around Blantyre. We spent the majority of our time visiting sites that this organization is responsible for. So if you're familiar with Presbyterian World Service and Development, which is a development agency within the Presbyterian Church in Canada, a huge portion of the funding that we send to Malawi ends up in the hands of this organization to do all kinds of different things. We could probably spend another 3 hours now just telling you about this organization and how fantastic it is and the kinds of things they're going to do, but we're not going to do that.
You're welcome.
But what we're gonna do is just share with you, really briefly, 4 little glimpses into some of the things that the church is doing there. Because this is really the church's work. And in Malawi, we'll mention this later, in Malawi there's not this there's not this separation that there is in Canada between church and society. When the church is doing something in Malawi, that's the people doing it. And so it's hard for us to kind of say, well, the church does this. It is, but it's also, that's just the way things are there. That's how those things are integrated. So we'll just, I think, Conrad, you're going to tell us just about the prison first.
I'm going to tell you a little bit about the prison. The prison was on the Wednesday morning, the first Wednesday that we arrived there. Some of us got a chance. I think Kella was there. We went to visit a prison Bible study, which sounds rather scary. And going into it, I have no imagery of it. Obviously, you can't take pictures of people who are in prison, of men who are in prison. But you can imagine, if you will, a third world prison built of brick, dirt floors. It's built for 600 people. I'm not sure which slide is up there. It's built for 600 men, but 1,800 men stayed there. And it was built for 600 men in close quarters. So these men would literally be on top of each other in these rooms, and then they'd wake up and they would have one meal a day if they had no support, and they would be in extremely tight quarters once they got out of their rooms. But the thing that was really interesting about this particular Bible study, which was held in a building, which is essentially some sticks with a garbage bag roof, and really clean tarps. And everybody had the protocol of taking off their shoes before they would get onto the tarps. There's about 300 prisoners who attended this Bible service. Most of them sat off to the side in the sunshine where it was nice and warm, but some people sat under the tarps. And the thing that struck me about this particular worship service, which was a Bible study, it was led by Mike Burns, who's the minister, one of the missionaries who we traveled with, was the authenticity of how these people cared about their faith, how they cared about the Bible, and how it changed their lives, how transformative it was for them. And there was a man who prayed at the front, and he got down on his knees, and he lifted his hands, and he lifted his face, and he prayed in this huge sonorous voice without any amplification. And I have no idea what he said, but it was a very authentic feeling to me. And it struck me that this is, again, another sign of how deep the faith of these people is, and how important the leadership of the church is that we saw as part of BSHDC. And so that's just one image that I would share with you.
So the next one that we're talking about, as I said, that I would be talking about Malawi Mission Hospital. This here is Malawi Mission Hospital. That is the pictures inside the ward. It was very interesting. First off, the hospital was like the hallways were all outdoor. That was it hurt my head for a little bit. This hospital serves 550,000 people in their area. They have 220 beds, and their current medical director, I can't remember where she's from, but her name is Ruth Shakespeare. She's from the UK, as Matt just told me. So she came over, and she is now working with this hospital. She's doing wonderful, wonderful work there. They do services with health services, and maternity services is actually a very large part of their hospital that we actually went to go see. They have outpatient and support services, which actually includes Okambiri, which is a goal to reduce maternal and neonatal deaths. That's what I was going for. This is both of these things are amazing things. It's very the big part about Malawi Hospital that really affected me was the fact that they have so much hope. They have so much joy into what they're doing with the little resources that they have. Every single Monday their power went out, and then it went out periodically throughout the week as well. This normally wouldn't affect them, except for the fact that petrol and diesel are so expensive, so they could not fund their generators to keep the electricity going. This affects, as you can think, if you're in the middle of a surgery and power goes out. What are you going to do? if you have a child that was born premature and they're sitting in an incubator, or they're sitting under heat lamps, or they're getting oxygen, the power goes out. This child most of the time dies, which is very unfortunate, and it was very heart-wrenching, but these people have so much hope, and they're currently on their year for solar power. Solar power is very expensive to start up, but once it's up, it's very good. So this is the year that they want to get solar power started so that they're able to do these surgeries and that they're able to always have power in their building, even if fuel or anything goes too expensive. The other thing I was talking about, Okambiri, I don't know if I said that right, but that's okay. This is throughout the communities. Each of the different villages and each of the different communities, what they had is they would have these people, they would have like RN nurses or something that would be in there that would normally help them throughout their pregnancies. They turned into referral agencies to go to the hospital to make sure that they had their child at the hospital instead of in their villages where their mortality rates, I can't remember how many died, but it was a lot, and it basically went down to none. When we went to go visit one community. Of course, in different communities, it's a little bit different, but in the one that we went to go visit, it was none, and it was great to see that they're able to fund an ambulance for these people to go, if it's a truck or even if it's just a bike. So that was Malawi Mission Hospital. It was a wonderful, wonderful place, and the people there are they have so much love, and it's a mission hospital, right? So they have so much faith in what they're doing and know what they're doing as well. So I will go now.
I just want to add a little bit to what Kella said. Just to clarify about the solar power at Malawi Mission Hospital, is they already received their grant for that and already have made the purchase of the solar panels and all of the batteries for it. So they're basically waiting. It'll arrive in the fall and get installed in the fall. So they're really hopeful that that's gonna. Basically, they would save close to a baby a day that dies in that hospital because of power outages. It's over 300 babies a year. So they're really looking forward to having the solar power in that place. There was another place that we visited. It was a day that Cal actually wasn't feeling well, so she wasn't able to go with us. But we went to a medical center called H. Parker Sharp, and that was another kind of extreme that we saw, that they had to close their maternity ward because they didn't have the funding or the staff to be able to keep it open. And that meant that if you were a woman and you went into labor, instead of having to walk 6 kilometers to H. Parker Sharp Medical Center, you would now probably have to walk, if you were the farthest away, you'd have to walk about 12 kilometers to the nearest place to have your baby. And you want to make sure that you're actually in labor before you set out on a 12-kilometer journey. You don't want to get there and be turned back. So there's so many, in those communities, there's so many babies that are then, they're forced to stay home and have their babies there. And the infant mortality rate, like Conrad said, is about 25% when the baby's born in the home. So there's some major issues around maternal health overall from what we saw in the areas we were in. But I wanted to talk to you about farming, though. So we saw a number of different sites that dealt with different farming issues around food security and water. The picture that you can see there, well, the 2 pictures you can see there, what's the name of the place? Namangazi Training Center. So what they do there, it's a working farm, and they actually sell quite a bit of what they produce. But they also use it as training for farmers. So farmers can come and basically do workshops on their site and learn about different farming techniques, how to diversify crops, and how to grow more drought-resistant crops. So we got to see different villages and how they put those kinds of things into practice, and then got to see a center where they actually do the work and people can kind of go and see how might it work. And they had just a variety of different crops there. So this is just a small part of it, but they have huge amounts of land for Malawi anyway. So it was a really interesting place to visit. I also wanted to mention about a really interesting thing, which is called self-help groups. that we don't really have a picture associated with. But self-help groups have been started by the Blantyre Senate Health Commission, and I think there are about around 60 or 65 groups that they now have in Blantyre. They've been running this program for about 18 months. And self-help groups they're doing amongst women in the poorest communities. What they do is they gather these women together, form them into a group of between 12 and 20, and they find people who are interested in starting a small business in their neighborhood. They have to pay out of their own money to be in the group, and then it's the group's money. And it'll be small, tiny amounts that they'll pay in. But then as a group, what they do is they set up bylaws and they set up a constitution for their group, and then the group lends out to within the group. So a woman can then make a business pitch, basically, to her self-help group, and they will lend her money to start her business. And she'll have to pay back that loan. It'll be a very short-term loan, and she has to pay it back with interest. But the self-help group will lend at something like 5% or 10%, as opposed to the bank, which is lending often at 30%. Imagine trying to borrow at 30%, even here in Canada. So this is why small businesses tend not to get started in the poorest neighborhoods. So the BSHTC has kind of set this structure up and tried to encourage women so that they can feel like they're empowered to work together. They found as soon as a man gets introduced into the group, he ends up taking over the group. And so the women don't really get empowered to do anything. So they've kept it strictly to women in these communities. What's great about this is that they hold one another accountable. And what blew me away was most places that we went when we asked, what can we do or what we can tell, they have a kind of a list of things. Well, we need a well, or we need access to clean water, or there'd be kind of, this is what we need. We asked them, what do you need? Because this sounds like a great program and it sounds like it's working really, really well. How can we help? How can we be involved? And they said, pray for us, but please don't do anything else. Because that's the whole point. This is a self-help group, and that's why it's working. So it was really interesting to hear that story, and that's why I wanted to share that with you tonight. There's lots you can do. Well, we get into that in other areas, but in that particular area, these women are actually starting to turn their communities around a little bit and turning their lives around for their families through their own work. And so let's hold them up in prayer for sure. But they asked us, please keep it to prayer and let us do what we can do, what we're able to do. Erin.
So as Conrad mentioned, one of the things about Malawi is it has a really young population. The life expectancy is not long, and the average family has 6 children. I thought it was funny, Conrad said to someone that he had 2 children, and they asked him if there was a law that kept him from having more. Like, why would we stop at 2? So that means having 6 children in the average family, there's a lot of kids everywhere. So our group visited 2 different children's programs run by the Synod, the Children's Corners, which were after-school programming for school-aged children, and community-based childcare centers, which were a more daycare-type program that was run during the day. The programs existed to provide psychosocial, educational, and nutritional support to area children. The staff and volunteers get to spend time with each child, make sure their basic needs are being met, and assess whether the children and families need more access to more programs and services, and then provide appropriate referrals. So these kids also get support, fun, and learning. When we went, the children did presentations for us, and they showed us the things that they learned. They sang the ABCs for us, things like that. Showed us some of the games they play. And the thing is, I kept with the children for another 3 hours or something, but I also want to tell you about another program that existed. So in Winnipeg here, when someone has a disability, even though our social system isn't perfect, there's quite a few resources that are available for them and their families. In Malawi, that system I just mentioned just doesn't exist. It's not there. There's no social safety net, there's no group homes, there's no day programs, there's no individualized education plans, there's no special support. So the church there saw a need, and they created the Tislarana Club, which is a club for people with disabilities. The club is self-governing, it has rules, it has bylaws, it has a committee that's in charge, and just for the record, Malawians like more even than Canadian Presbyterians. Like, Malawian culture, it's not just the church, it's everywhere there's committees. But anyway, so this place has a committee in charge, and it's pretty amazing. They meet every Tuesday afternoon in a Catholic church for worship, prayer, snacks, games, crafts, socializations, peer support, and professional support. So the club involves both adults and children in the community who are living with a disability, as well as their main support person, because that person needs support too. And lots of people, of course, want to bring their whole families, but that's just not manageable, so one support. Deb, who's one of the PCC missionaries, is a social worker, and she's providing these intensive intakes so that we can really find out people's stories and get them the support and referrals that they need. Other church members provide support, food, things like that. There's a child psychologist that comes every week as a volunteer. And the club limited its membership to 100 people, and that way everyone there can be known and cared for. So the day we came to the club, there was a lot going on. I walked in and I was shaking hands and introducing myself to people, because like we said, that's very important. You shake hands. And so I bent down to shake hands with a little girl on the ground, and she just didn't let go. So I decided I'd just stop introducing myself and sit down beside her. And this progressed to her sitting on my lap and then finally falling asleep in my arms. So from our seat against the wall, I got a good view of everything that was going on. After a time of worship, people spread out. Some people were doing a craft with some of our groups. Some people were playing soccer with Matt and Kella. Other people were reading books, playing with toys, talking. There was mothers rolling their children back over an exercise ball to stretch their stiffened or spastic muscles. There was people getting first aid supplies for the week ahead. One-on-one interaction between club members and volunteers, and there's probably a ton of other stuff going on that I couldn't catch. I got the chance to talk to a newer member of the club and hear her story of losing her leg after being assaulted and robbed, and that left her unable to carry water for her family. So Mike, one of the missionaries, is now going to look into getting her a prosthetic leg, because coming off crutches and having these her hands back would enable her to care for her family much more easily. And when asked what keeps her going, she said, well, it's her faith that gives her all the strength and all the hope she needs. The last thing I'm going to say is that a few years ago, the club saw a need to protect some of its most vulnerable members, those who weren't doing well in the community, even with support of family and friends. So they, with the support of the church, built a shelter with 14 rooms. And it's super nice. Like, it's nicer than some of the homeless shelters we have in Winnipeg. So they, with the support of the church, built this shelter. And they have both adults and children staying there and a living caretaker, support person. So our group asked, really innocently, well, what would have happened if there wasn't the shelter? And the missionaries looked at us and they're like, well, if it didn't exist, these people would all probably be dead. And so we're like, wow. And that's the teeth that are on it, though.
So throughout this entire presentation, we've been talking about Mike and Debbie. The other missionaries from the PCC that we met were Todd and Annika. The PCC partnership, these two couples, we met and we spent most of our time with Mike and Debbie, and they are the most wonderful people you could ever meet. They love Malawi more than anybody I've ever, they were immersed in the Malawian culture. All of their friends were Malawian. They tried to speak to Chewa. Like Debbie, she's been there, 18 months? Yeah. And most of the Malawians said, you have such good Chewa. Like, it's almost like you're a Malawian. And that's just the joy that they have from being there. Mike is an associate minister at the St. James Church, helping out the CCAP, making sure that they have more qualified ministers within the CCAP. Okay, I can see Mike and Debbie there. Aaron will tell you about their cats and everything else that help them keep going within Malawi, because being a missionary anywhere is going to be tough work, because you're not in Canada. You don't get the same luxuries that we get here, as I will call them. But they said that their favorite things is getting notes from people, getting cards from people, giving them support, having people pray for them, saying, we support you. We know that what you're doing out there is such good work, because the work that Mike and Debbie are both doing out there is amazing work. Debbie works for BSHDC in the OVC department, which is the Orphan Vulnerable Children. Yeah, got it right. Acronyms are not my thing. And she was the one that brought us to these children's corners, and we saw the joy that she had being with these people and in the work that she did. And we saw Mike's joy in going to being in these churches and seeing the work that he does in them and meeting these people and doing funerals and doing weddings and doing everything that he has to do. And it's a joy for him. They have so much faith, so much love of God, and it's just amazing. The other two that we went to go see that are up there is Todd and Annika, Mayo and Sophia. Todd is from Canada in Vancouver, and he met his wife Annika, and they lived in Germany for a while, and then they moved to Malawi. Todd is a professor at Zomba School Theological College, and that is what he's doing there. He's teaching there, and he's helping them with everything that they need to do there, and bringing the PCC into that school. And Annika is doing such great help supporting her children. As you can tell, bringing kids to a country like that probably isn't the easiest thing in the world to do, and she's doing it with such a smile and such a love for her kids and for God and for the country of Malawi as well. So it was wonderful to meet these people that are over there, that are there working every day. So I'll pass it on.
One of the things about being a missionary is sometimes people ask, well, what does a missionary even do? And as Cal explained, Mike, I'm not a missionary, so you can take that, go back. There you go. Leave them up there for now. As Cal explained, Mike Burns is actually the associate minister at a church there. So it kind of sounds like, oh, well, he's just basically a minister, the same way anybody would be a minister here. But he actually does far, far more than that. And one of the biggest things is that he is kind of the constant presence of the Presbyterian Church in Canada in that area. And that's a really big deal. So when he goes to any of these things that we mentioned, if he goes and visits or shows up and is involved at the Titsalarana Club or shows up at a community where a well had been put in with PWS&D dollars, they see him as, you are the person who gave the money for this. So he has that responsibility of basically being the go-between between the churches. He's kind of the face of the partnership between the denominations. And that's a huge deal when you're in those communities. So he has a major responsibility of communicating back to our denomination about what's happening in Malawi, and has a huge responsibility of being there and communicating with the different organizations that the Presbyterian Church in Canada has partnerships with in Malawi. So he does all of that in addition to being full-time minister in a congregation. And there's a massive shortage of ministers, so he'll be interim moderator in several congregations. He will do funerals, a lot of funerals, not just in his own church where there's over 3,000 members in St. James. Churches are very large in general in Malawi. So it's a huge, huge task that he has. So sometimes we see, if you're a member in a Presbyterian church, sometimes you'll see little leaflets that may show up from time to time, either as a bulletin insert or in a newsletter or something, and it'll have, Mike and Debbie's smiling faces, just like they are there, or Todd and Annika's smiling faces, and a little write-up with one paragraph because we don't want to read too much and take the time. But you need to understand the amount of work that they put in for God and for their church. And so next time you see them, or next time you see any missionary kind of referred to, because it's the same in all of our other countries and all our other partnerships that we have, just take a moment and just pray for those people, because they know when people are praying for them and just feel so supported and upheld in prayer. And with that, I think Erin's going to tell us all about the role of the church in society.
Well, I don't know if I can tell you all about the role of church in society, but we've been really good tonight about not giving you any statistics pretty much, but I'm going to give you a couple. So, according to the statistics, 82% of the people in Malawi identify as Christians. And there's 13% who identify as Muslim and then a bunch of other things. But 82% of the population is Christian. So there's 14 million people in Malawi, and 1.2 million of those people are members of a Church of Central Africa Presbyterian Church. Okay? So 14 million people, 1.2 million are members of the Church of Central Africa Presbyterian. So the CCAP is made up of 5 synods, which are 3 in Malawi, 1 in Zambia, and 1 in Zimbabwe. And Presbyterians are the largest Protestant denomination in Malawi. As you can imagine, with that kind of membership and committed faith base, especially when you take into consideration that I said 1.2 million people are Presbyterian, that's adults. Most churches have Sunday schools which are at least as big, if not bigger, than their membership, making the number of worshiping Presbyterians at least double that, maybe closer to 2.5 million. So the church has a lot of power and influence over everyday life, and people's churches are their families. So I want you to imagine something for me. St. John's Church, we're here tonight. So imagine this. They call a new minister, and they make some preparations for their induction service. So they send an announcement to the other churches in the presbytery, and they decide, well, might as well send an announcement to the faith briefs portion of the Free Press. So, maybe some other people will see it. So they decide, okay, well, we should hold this service at a special time, maybe just a little bit earlier so we have enough time for everything. So the day of the induction comes, the church is jam-packed, and it's bursting. Like, people are standing in the doorways, there's people, standing over there, and there's tons of people from other churches. Other ministers have come. The Free Press decided, hey, you know what? We're not just going to write this, we're going to come, we're going to send a camera and a reporter. And CTV National is there too. They've got a camera crew, they want to film the event, they want to get interviews. The service takes 3 hours, and no one complains, because they're all too busy worshiping and praising and celebrating. So that's sort of like a picture of what an induction service in Malawi is like. The Sunday we did homestays, all of the congregations we attended were a bit emptier than normal. Many of them had guest ministers, because people were at the induction. So one of our group members from Ontario was at the church that was inducting their new minister. She got to witness it firsthand, and she also got to star on national TV, because, of course, the TV was there filming the induction and doing interviews, and here was this Presbyterian from Canada. Well, we got to get her too. So the normal services, that there would have been 3, were canceled in favor of one extra long one, so that all the formalities could take place. So you can imagine, with something like that, the church just has so much bigger a role in society, and I thought I'd share that little example of that with you.
Let me just go over this here. If you would have asked me, I don't know how long ago now, 6 weeks ago, that I would be standing up here giving a plea for books for pastors, I would have said that you were pretty crazy. My bias, personal bias, from the church perspective, is very much from the social perspective. My interest in Malawi was very much in helping HIV, was in microfinance, was in helping women and supporting women. But I think those are all really good things. But I have something that's I think is better. Go ahead. I guess the thing that I have now is, instead of a social bias, I have a little bit more of a humility bias, and I'm glad my family's pretty much left. The first thing I want to talk about is and we talked a lot about BSHTC, I'm not going to talk about that. But the main thing that I think is that we need to support is the role of the Abusa. The role of, you can flip to the next one. The role of the Abusa, that's it. An Abusa is Chichewa for shepherd, is the word for minister or moderator in Chichewa. That's what they use as their term. This is much more of an influential role than it is here, with apologies to Peter and Ken and Matt. Whenever the Abusa says something, this is something that is taken as law, literally taken as law. What happens is that the Kirk sessions are much more powerful than they are here. They enforce discipline. They do not merely run the church and say when we're going to have baptisms and so forth. They say things like, you may not associate with such and such a person, you may not come to church. They influence community life to a much, much greater degree than we think is possible here. So this Abusa role is incredibly important. Now, the problem is there are not nearly enough abusa in the country. Go ahead. This is a different induction ceremony that happened. You can see the whole row of people that were there. And this just struck me as how important it is to the entire church. I also was at an induction ceremony. There was people outside. They had loudspeakers out. They had all around the grounds. They had people that were listening to this particular role. This service started at 7, and we had to leave early to be somewhere at 1. We had to leave early at noon. So pretty important stuff. Now, the thing is this, is the reason that I'm really jazzed about a particular project that's here is that it supports this Abusa role and how important this leadership role is. I can't overemphasize how important this role is. Todd Statham requested, when we asked him what kind of a project can we put together that would really make a difference here in Malawi, he said that the Abusas, when they graduate from Zomba Theological College, they're equipped with a Bible, which is absolutely vital to their work, but they have nothing else. They have no library, they have no study resources, they have absolutely nothing else. They're left only with the traditions that they have, in the local traditions they have, and they have no other Christian influence in their lives. The Zomba Theological College, with no disrespect to them, is it's a pretty junior level. We attended one of the classes in Zomba Theological College, a third-year course, and I was not at all. It was what I would consider a high school level kind of a thing. It's an introductory level, at best, level to theology. So they really desperately need some sort of commentary, some sort of African context. They need some sort of picture that gives them a Christian orientation beyond just the Bible. This is an example of the Bible, the library that is there. That's for the entire Zomba Theological College, and this was donated in the not too long ago. But all the books, you'll notice that all the books are from it was donated in the 80s?
Donated in the 80s. Most of the books are from 1960s.
1960s. So you can see that from a modern context, there's just nothing there that can really fit with what's going on. You can go ahead. Oh, so this is the next one. So, yeah, you're up.
All right, we're coming to the end. Some people are dragging, and there's coffee and tea and things like that are waiting. But what now? Just real quickly. The first thing, we haven't actually told you, we've scratched the surface and kind of give you a bit of a glimpse into our trip. But if you've heard anything here that's caught your interest, educate yourself. There's tons of resources on the internet, online. You talk to us afterwards. Go to Presbyterian.ca and find PWSND. And they've got tons of information about all kinds of different mission activities around the world. So find out about these issues. Like Conrad just scratched the surface on some of the issues that are there in Malawi and just kind of identifying them. But if you're thinking, well, I thought HIV/AIDS, wasn't that 1990s? Didn't we deal with that? No, we didn't. And go and read up on it if you think that's the case, because it's still a major, major problem. And there's all kinds of things like that. There's all kinds of resources to educate yourself. The second thing we want to say as a group is, if you were able to go on a trip like this, do it.
Yeah.
Do it. I was a little hesitant to go. Part of me just went because I had a couple of people in my congregation interested in going, and I thought it would be kind of hard for them coming back to talk about it without having their minister kind of understand what they went through. I would go again in a heartbeat. And not just for myself, but just because it can have a transforming effect when you come back. Not just on your own heart and your own mind, but on the people you know and the people around you. I wrote about this and put it on the Trinity website the other day, about how most of us generally don't want to listen to the staff person in Toronto talk about mission things. Most of us may not even listen to the missionaries if they come here and talk, but most of us will listen to somebody we know and trust. And if we can come back and talk to some of our friends who we know and say, the Blantyre Senate Health Commission does make a huge difference, and if you give money to PWSND, it gets into the hands of the people who know how to use that money and get the most out of it and do the most good. If we say that and you know us, you're way more likely to follow through on that. And if any of you can go on a trip and say that to the people you know who trust you, it makes a huge difference and a huge impact. Some of you may not be able to go on trips like that. Well, support those around you in your congregations or in your lives who are able to do these kinds of things. It's a great opportunity. Give money. We talked there about how your money actually goes a really long way there. We sometimes sit here and think, wow, those problems are overwhelming. You know, my $50 or my $20, that's just a drop in the bucket, it's going to do nothing. It will save somebody's life. Think about what Nathan shared with us earlier on tonight. I mean, World Vision gave that one man, what was it? A pig, a few chickens through another program, and look at the change that resulted from that. There's huge multiplication that takes place in places like Uganda or Malawi when we give $20, $50, or whatever it is. And the people over there, they know the best place for that money to end up. They know the best programs for where that should go. So when you give to an organization like Presbyterian World Service and Development, they have fantastic partners all around the world and we just got to see some of them in Malawi. But the partnerships that they've created are good quality partnerships where they know the people on the ground and they know that those people are going to use those dollars to get the most out of them. A lot of that money as well, in certain areas, are matched by CEDA. But I did want to say a number of CEDA grants have been cut back recently. And I know I was going to mention as well, Howie Simpson is here today. Howie, do you want to just sort of wave? Howie's on the National Committee for Presbyterian World Service and Development. And Cheryl Eaglesham, who's at the back there, used to be on the National Committee for PWS&D. So if you have questions for them, they'll be available afterwards as well. And they might be able to tell you more about CEDA grants and things like that, and how the money works. Lastly, again, I just want to encourage you about the Zomba Books project. This is something that may not have happened if we wouldn't have gone on the trip. When we asked Todd, is there anything that we can help with? Their initial response was prayer, cards, emails. And it was Debbie Burns who stopped and said, Todd, this group is really action-oriented. If you have something, you should tell them. And he said, well, I don't know if we can get a lot of funding for this kind of thing, because not a lot of people want to give to, wells or schools. Not a lot of people want to give books to ministers. And we said, we believe in this, and we think that this is something people will want to do to equip pastors to make a real change in their communities, a real difference in their communities. So tonight we have a couple of things for you. There's an envelope here that you can give a special gift or special offering, and anything that's given tonight is going to go to the Zomba Books project. So you make out checks to the Presbytery of Winnipeg, you get a receipt for $10 or more, and anything that we collect tonight will go directly to the Zomba Books project. Our goal is to try to get $25,000, not tonight necessarily, but hey, if you want to do it, go for it. But $25,000 in about a year's time. And off the interest of that, it will be enough to give 3 books to every graduating student for the foreseeable future. That's not a lot of money to do something like that. So please consider giving a gift tonight, or take things home with you and think about what you'd like to give to.